So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a Brilliant Businesses podcast. My name is Nick Bryant, and I'm here today with Matt Cox. Hello, Matt.
Hi there. How are you? Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad.
Good. I didn't introduce you where you're from. You're from the Charles Cox Group. That was a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
And you are specialists in leasehold property management and surveying services. Matt's been in the property sector for, I think, 20 years. Is it 20 years?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, about 2003, 4, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've seen a few changes over the while,
Yes.
I'm sure. So tell us how it all came about, Matt. Tell us how it all started.
Okay. So with the leasehold stuff, so basically I was a leaseholder. I owned a property in a block of flats in Peacehaven. And what was happening is the freeholder was kind of putting up scaffold, repairing something, and then putting the scaffold back down. And then a week later, they put it back up again. And we thought, as a leaseholder, you have to pay for that, essentially. So this isn't particularly productive use of our money, and we're not really in control of it. So family members of mine, they also owned property in the same building. So we kind of clubbed together with the other leaseholders, and we basically purchased the freehold from the freeholder. Okay. The posh word is enfranchised, so we basically collectively enfranchised.
Okay.
And we decided to run the building ourselves. Ironically, the person that helped us enfranchise actually became a business partner of mine later on, which we'll come on to. But so he sort of said, "Do you want to manage an agent?" And we said, "No, we'll do it ourselves, as we've done so much." So we took it to heart, really, myself and the other family members, that we really should understand the legislation and the rest of it. But I suppose the breaking point was actually we were offered a business to buy, which only had about 10 or so block management properties from somebody else who'd purchased a business, and it had a small portfolio, but because we knew and understood the legislation. So then what happened was that they basically said, right, you buy that and you run that. And we thought, well, that's fine because we understand it. And what's the point in having all the knowledge and only doing one building? Yeah. We did that. The other people, family members that I was involved with, kind of got a bit sick of the leaseholders and whinging and, and all the moaning about repairs not being done. And at the time I was at university, and they wanted me to buy them out, basically buy the company and buy them out, because they were commercial people and they're not used to kind of dealing with the public, if I'm honest. That's probably why they run out of patience on it. But I wasn't in a position to do that because I wanted to finish my degree. So I actually went to a firm in Lewes called Clifford Dan, and we sold the whole business to that, and I went to work for them. I worked my way up as a partner. Clifford Dan is actually where Andrew, who helped us do the enfranchise, he worked there, so that's the sort of connection there. Andrew actually left and went on to do his own thing. So I did that. I made a partner there, and then I actually packed up and decided to concentrate solely on my own stuff in 2015. Although Charles Cox was formed in 2010, because we had some kind of portfolios like this original one that we didn't merge with Clifford Dan, and we carried on managing it ourselves. And the rest is kind of history, really. So started with me being on my own actually we're in an office in Seaford. A little pokey one, and then we moved, and we've been in this place now since 2018, and we've now got 3 offices, one in Eastbourne, Newhaven and Brighton. So I mean, we're talking in a bit, but we spoke earlier about the growth and how you've handled the growth, because you've really shot up to, how many people did you say you have now? It's 16. 16, from that amount. So Charles Cox Group, it's sort of you're called Matt. Is Charles? I thought it was your dad, because I said to you about it earlier, and you said no, my dad's something else. So tell us the story behind that. So as I said earlier, my dad's name's Bob, actually. So nothing to do with Charles. Basically I made a conscious decision that I would call it Charles Cox, because that's my middle name, Charles, and it kind of rolls off the tongue a bit better than, say, like Matt Cox, for instance, and I thought it sounded more established. It also helped me a bit when I was just a one-man band, essentially, and I was ringing up to pitch for buildings or work or whatever, and I'm not kind of saying it's Matt Cox from Matt Cox Management, because that sounds a bit like you are quite small. So and I would purposely not say my surname as well, so I'd be like, oh hello, it's Matthew from Charles Cox, so then they might think I have a different surname and we were bigger than we were. And the logo, I really liked it because I thought it was quite simple and it was synonymous with what I wanted to achieve really from that. So the two C's, they're supposed to be like two hands kind of shaking, essentially like, we'll work with you and that's what we're here for. And then Charles Cox sounded like much more established than perhaps it otherwise was at the time. So I made a conscious decision to do that. Obviously people always think that it's my dad or my uncle.
I've known of other businesses that have done the same thing, and it works really effectively. It's very strategic actually. And
well, I one of the things I studied at uni was to do with this marketing arrangement and business studies, and James Caan, who was one of the Dragon's Dens, his business was called Alexander Mann, and it's for the same reason. He didn't use his own name, and he was like Alexander, that sounded like a British name, and then Mann was like a short powerful word, and nothing to do with him, but it allowed him to do the same thing. So probably a bit of inspiration from
well,
that.
It's not a bad guy to get inspired by, is it? He's quite a successful man. Let's move on to the services that you offer. So let's talk about block management to start off with. So why should someone use a block management agent?
Yeah, so most blocks of flats in the UK, they have a lease, and that's really how people should act. So you have your kind of freeholder and your leaseholder. The freeholder is responsible for X, Y, Z, and then the leaseholder is responsible for paying for it. That's kind of it, as a much more longer explanation, but that's it in a nutshell. And the problem is that when you've got an enfranchised building particularly, is that people live in that building, and they might have to do debt collection from their fellow leaseholders. They might disagree with the terms of the lease and so on, and it's very useful having a managing agent as a third party to act in that skill. But also we're bringing our professional experience to the building, and we're also understand the way the leases are written and so on, because they are written in such a language that kind of interpretation is key in it. And we can really steer people through all the legislation. A lot of it's changed since Grenville with the fires and so on, and even asbestos, Legionella, all the other various reports, electrical testing as well, that's all changed since I was involved in kind of 2003-04 originally. So I think whilst there are a lot of buildings that self-manage, and they do that really successfully, when you get to a certain size, maybe a kind of about 8 flats, you're filled with people with opinions and views on things, and it's not very nice going up in the lift with the guy that you're also suing for non-payment of service charge.
It's nice to have that third party, isn't it?
It's good to be able to use this almost like a shield, to be honest. And my old boss at the previous job, he used to say the buildings are easy, it's the people in them that's hard. And so there is a massive amount of people management and manage expectations, opinions and views and so on. And the buildings are all different. Some are high-end class, some are first-time buyers, some are buy-to-let landlords. It's very different.
So this is where the surveying side comes in, because you've got to survey the building as well, make sure it's all up to scratch.
So obviously if you take your kind of medium rise block of flats, so it's a block of 15 or something, one thing that we would advocate people do is have a kind of 1 to 5 year maintenance plan, and that would also run alongside whatever's in the lease. So the lease might say it needs painting and decorating every 7 years, but we would build that into their plan, so they actually have the money in the pot to do that when we get round to that 7th year. Obviously they're guesstimates, so sometimes there's a shortfall, or maybe we've budgeted too much. But the surveying department will do that. They'll also do things like they'll come around and they'll fully measure the building and work out what the rebuild cost is. So if there was a fire and it was completely destroyed, so you're insuring for the correct amount, so you're not under-insuring or over-insuring. And we'll also do things like damp defect liability, that sort of thing, inherent defects. So you might have like a gutter that's leaking, or the cavity, or there's some sort of issue going on with the building where there's a defect. And the builder can't just be asked to go and fix it, because they may not understand the sort of technical details, or they might do it and then no one's supervising them, so you're kind of taking their word for it. So the building surveyors will go around and they'll basically look at the job and go, right, this is what needs to happen, and then make sure that does happen. So, and they do like probably 7 years worth of training from start to finish to get their RICS memberships.
And how many of those have you got in your team?
So we have 8 of those, and they're all freelance consultants, because that kind of industry lends themselves to that. So the 16 odd people that we referred to earlier are actually PAYE staff, whereas the freelancers, the surveyors tend to sort of work on that basis, really, because they will have other clients and so on.
And that makes it flexible for you as well, I guess.
It massively does, and of course, in our industry, speed is often the king. Because people don't tend to mind too much if it's costing £50 or £60 because it's being divided by, say, 12 or more flats, so it's pence to them. But actually, it's more important that something gets done quickly and promptly. So, like, often you get communal bins and people dump stuff in there, then the bin men won't take it away. So we have like probably 12 rubbish removal people that we can access at any one moment, and it's the speed of doing that. Otherwise it all just racks up and so on.
And also the tenant always going to complain to someone, and then the block management company gets it in the neck because you're meant to be looking after it and all that kind of
Exactly that, and then it creates more work for us as well because we're getting more phone calls. So speed is king, which is why we tend to try and make sure we have a diverse access to contractors and sub consultants.
Okay. We spoke earlier about the future and the growth that you've enjoyed. A lot of that growth came after COVID, didn't it, from what you're saying earlier? So how did you cope with that? I mean, there's a lot of people that, you've got to manage and help. And
so interestingly, I know there'll be a lot of businesses out there that really struggle through COVID, but I would owe a lot to technology and some of the IT support that we had and various things that we had in place, which are akin to a newer business. You don't have all these legacy issues. So one thing was when the pandemic hit, everybody went to work from home, and we were on the OneDrive already. We were all, we all had remote laptops. Our telephones were always VoIP already, so we just literally plugged them in at home, and we still had all our staff working. We didn't furlough anybody. We basically just had a full system going, so it was like we were still open. Most of our competitors had furloughed their workers, and they were already only running an out-of-hours service. So at the time, I didn't realise this, but actually that led to a lot of people jumping ship and coming to us and saying, look, they're still citing COVID issues, 18 months after the first lockdown and so on, and backlogs. And we've had our fair share of problems. I'm not going to say we didn't. But it's been an exciting time, and definitely because of where we were positioned, I think we really managed to capitalise on that.
It sounds like it. It's like you kept going full speed ahead and everyone else was stopping, so you were ahead of the game for when it gathers momentum again.
That's it. That's basically it. And I'm quite a workaholic, if I'm honest. So the lockdown was strange for me because I didn't know where the work started and finished. So and I'm sure that probably helped a bit, but I mean, technology was a massive game changer for us, just being in the right place when that happened, and not,
Well, it sounds like you digitalised a lot of things, and that was important in that period, wasn't it? Because the human touch was out. So
exactly that. I mean, if you take the firm I left, when I left there, I don't know if they moved on, but they would have had like analog phones still plugged into the wall on a cable. So they probably would have done a lot of what our competitors did, which was just divert all phones to one line, and then someone sat in a room answering it, basically saying we're dealing with emergencies only. Whereas we were like, well, if we can get someone to go there, that's fine. Cleaners are still working, contractors still need to repair leaky roofs just because we're all locked down. So it was quite advantageous to us having all of the access to that.
That's it. Now that's just not this. There's other bits to the business as well. The doing up the properties side of things. I've said that in layman's terms. Tell us, because you're excited about that and you like that part of it.
Everybody loves that. I'm quite famous for sort of saying, if you open the door and it smells of cat wee, think of me. That's one of my strap lines. But basically, that sort of stems from a kind of a want, if you like, to sort of make sure that we had income that was sustainable and maybe passive outside of our actual normal salary, if you like, back in the day. So probably, I mean, 2010, after the last, after the financial crash, I'll say the last one, hopefully there won't be another one.
No.
So after the financial crash, obviously properties did dip in price, and I was just in a position where we managed to pick up something quite cheap. It really needed a lot of work on it. It's the original cat wee smelly property.
Is it?
The business model was brilliant. Like, I bought it, did it up, we refinanced it, got most of our money back out of it, and then we had an income. Obviously after tax and mortgage we were about £300 a month better off, and I just thought this is a really good system. But it is quite slow because you've got to obviously build up a pot of money and the rest of it. So the key is to make sure that you're buying it kind of under market value because it needs work doing to it. doing the work and then refinancing it so you get your money back out. And otherwise you've got to keep building it. So we don't really look for mint condition properties, or we call them turnkey, like turn a key and sit down.
Okay,
we're more looking for dilapidated or unloved or distressed or whatever, whether that's a short lease from a leasehold property or something that needs some work, it's got subsidence, or just is really out of date and not really rental ready.
Okay. So if there's anyone out there that's got anything like that, get in touch, right?
Yeah, definitely. We're not like your kind of typical sort of we buy houses for cash type people. No. We will always try and come up with a creative way of solving the problem as to why that person's got there. For example, just around the corner from here, we had one property where the lady had basically been inherited money, and she had bought the property, tried to do it up herself, made it almost unmortgageable in trying to do it, and then running out of money, and kind of just wanted to sell the property and then move on and be somewhere nice and not kind of waste her inheritance, if you like, because she felt a bit like she'd wasted some of it. In the process, she'd racked up some debt as well, and her goal was basically sell it for XYZ, but I need to clear my debt. So it really wasn't worth what she wanted to sell it for, and obviously the debt needed to be cleared. So we came up with a creative way of kind of helping her. So I would take control of the debt and pay that down, and then we would pay a discounted rate. So then what she got was actually moved into a property that didn't need any work, so she can get on with her life, and she didn't have the debt. But for us, we've paid under market value, we've taken off the debt from her, everybody's happy, and that's it. So it's not about kind of coming in and going, oh, that's our price, we'll pay for it, and here's a cash offer. It was very much, you know, let's try and do some creative financing here and see if we can help you out as much as ourselves. You know, it's a business model to us, but I don't want you to kind of feel like we've sort of screwed you over, essentially.
And you work a lot with the council as well, housing people.
Yeah, definitely. So our kind of business model at the moment is to buy these dilapidated properties, make them nice again, whatever that means to do. And then we work with Brighton and Hove Council. They have a department in there that basically caters for people that have fallen on hard times through no reason of their own. We've got a guy that was in the UK with his wife, and then she just up sticks and went to Nigeria and left him in the UK with 2 kids. I'm sure there's more to the story than that, but that's where he was at. And in order to get himself back, you know, straight again, he needed the council's help. But a lot of people won't take that sort of person because obviously the council are paying the deposits and the rest of it. But we work exclusively with them. And the first time I came across this, I had a flat in Peacehaven, and they said, oh, we've got a few viewings. And I turned up and I was running a bit late, and I couldn't get up the communal stairwell for all the people queuing to get into the flat. And it just made my heart drop, really. These people are, you know, a lady and a guy, and she was pregnant. They lost their home because the owner of the home was getting divorced, and part of the divorce settlement was they had to sell the home. So no fault of their own. But because of, you know, bad credit or whatever reason, they couldn't rent through the normal system. So the council do all of the deposit and all of the inventory and all the rest of it. And so it's quite cost effective for us, but actually you feel like you're giving something back. And that scenario where I'm in the stairwell with the 15 people, so that just made me want to sort of help and buy more and sort those, you know, help those people out really and get them back on their feet.
It's giving back, isn't it? Which is really important for businesses as well, rather than just, you know, making profit. So you're based here in Newhaven. How far do you go out? Is there a circumference of something?
So our primary area is Eastbourne to Brighton, and then up to kind of Burgess Hill, Haywards Heath area. That's our kind of core. We go up to London and across to Hastings and down to Littlehampton. That's our kind of main sort of area, really. And then we have an office in Eastbourne. We have an office in Newhaven and Brighton. Some of those are born of our expansion, so we've acquired other companies and they've been more based in those towns. So we've then decided to open offices there, and then obviously kind of our principal head office, if you like, is here in Newhaven on the exotically named Denton Island.
It's very exotic, it is. So how many properties have you, did you say you've got 16 properties that you've that you let out and you rented?
Yeah, so from our kind of rental division, Charles Cox Capital Limited, so that has about 16 properties, which are all of them, bar maybe a handful, are dilapidated or were dilapidated or distressed properties or whatever, or ones with short leases that you couldn't get mortgages on. And we've basically purchased those. We're not scared of buying leasehold property, obviously. That's what we do here. If we were, then what are we doing here?
Exactly, goes against what we believe.
So we buy a lot of leasehold property with short leases and things like that, and then we would rent back through to the council, really. So,
Okay, so those are the three key services that you do. So it's the block management, the doing up the properties, and right to manage.
So alongside all of the sort of surveying and the block management and the rest of it, we can actually help people take control of their buildings. So the enfranchisement process that I referred to at the beginning, that actually costs money because you're actually offering to buy the freehold off of the freeholder. So there is a value attached to that, and it's not for everybody. And if everybody doesn't join in, then of course the value goes up. If you've got 10 people and only 7 of them can join in, the value it's worth doesn't change, but the 7 people have got to find that. So the legislation changed, and it allows leaseholders to serve a notice on the freeholder saying that they would like the right to manage their building themselves. Obviously, they don't actually physically have to manage it themselves. They can appoint an agent like ourselves, but it takes away from the freeholder the right to choose the managing agent or managing them. Normally, that's because the building's got into a bit of a dilapidated state, because ultimately it's your asset, your flat that you've owned. So, you've got an invested interest to make sure the building's repaired and maintained properly, and the freeholder might be in breach of their obligations, but not interested in dealing with that. So it's a good tool for that reason. People often do right to manage because this freeholder sort of says, we need a new roof, which they do need a new roof, and here's the quote, and they don't like the quote. Often people do it on the basis that once they've got the right to manage, they then kind of don't have to pay the bill, but actually the roof hasn't repaired itself. So it's kind of quite difficult. You have to divulge down as to what people why they really want to do the right to manage, and if it's literally just because they don't want to pay a big bill, well, the roof is not going to repair itself. But then that incomes creativeness as well, because they might be able to talk to the freeholder and maybe sell the roof space to a developer to build flats on it, and then they're not paying out for the roof space. So the legislation has changed quite a lot in the last few years about building on top of airspace, essentially. So it's much more open to people now. And so our job is to kind of find a solution for people and work with them to get what they need out of it without kind of crippling them along the way.
There's so many ins and outs, isn't there? And there's so many rules and legalities that you probably have to follow, which you probably have to spend a lot of time researching, I would have thought, and keeping on top of.
Definitely. A lot of the legislative stuff has changed since Grenville. Obviously, it's very sad, but since then, there's been new fire regulation acts, so they came into force in 2022. The original acts actually came into force in 2006, and that's when you first had to get a fire risk assessment. But like most things, when the legislation comes out, it needs kind of tidying up and rounding off, and they spent a long time doing that. Fast forward to 2022, it's all come in now, and it's all to do with heights of buildings, fire doors, regular checks, and so on. So it's a lot more onerous than it used to be. And we are seeing a lot more self-managed buildings come to us and say, look, we just can't cope with the volume of work and understanding of it all. That compounded with a couple of our competitors have been purchased by larger firms, and they haven't made a very good transition. So we've had a kind of influx of new clients, if you like, from those two events.
You've got so much knowledge, and you're very passionate about it. You've got such a great business which is growing and growing. It's very impressive.
Thank you.
If anyone out there wants any help with property management, block management, buying properties, that sort of thing, or selling, so you can help with them, then please get in touch with Matt. I was going to say Charles then, but I meant Matt. All his details. All his details are on the Brilliant Businesses website, and you can get in touch with Matt via the website, or just ring up the offices. That's right?
Yeah, that's it. So website's pretty simple. Just charlescox.co.uk.
Excellent.
We got in that one early.
Yes. Well done.
All the details are on there for everyone.
Okay.
So if you need any services at all along those lines, then we're more than happy to help, even if it's just bending our ear initially, and then we can give you some guidance, and then you can make your educated decision on that.
Excellent. And thank you for asking me in to do the podcast. It was great to see you.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, it's great to see you too.
Okay, we'll see you for another podcast soon. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Cheers.
Cheers.